Good morning. Welcome to Great Tree Zen Women's Temple. Our speaker this morning is Meredith McIntosh. But first, would you please initiate the opening sutra, Teja?
An unsurpassed,
Penetrating and perfect dharma
is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas.
Having it to see and listen to,
Remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of those Bodhisattvas' teaching.
Now, brief statement on dana. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit about speaking of the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana is to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. You can either do this directly, or we have in the chat place to send dana for Meredith. If you would look at that, please. Meredith McIntosh is a longtime member of Great Tree and a regular speaker at Great Tree. She speaks seasonally to match the time of year, and this is her spring speech, her spring time to talk. Meredith is a longtime Zen practitioner, and she's a student and teacher of the Alexander technique for body awareness, which is a good thing for Zen practitioners who sit to have a very strong awareness of their body. Welcome, Meredith.
Thank you. Well, I called today's talk or sharing or time together, I think it was pause, and also guided constructive rest. And then I think I also added there at the end, pause, and then we would look at pausing in action. So I would like to just introduce the concept of, I mean, we kind of know the literal concept of sitting. People here are used to sitting and doing nothing. So that can also be a sense that we have when we're actually doing things. And in order to sort of have that sense of time and awareness of what we're doing as we're doing it, and a kind of time, a non-rushed sense, even if we have a lot of things to do. And in our busyness, there can be moments, there can be an integration of the person or the self we meet when we're on the cushion. In zazen, we can always also have a sense of that space and time as we're in the grocery store or as we're tending to a million things. And part of what helps bring that into action is the concept that we can rest in a constructive way, in a conscious way, and then, by conscious, I mean we can notice ourselves, we can kind of do a way of thinking even as we're lying down and supposedly doing nothing, but we're not taking a nap either. So that's what Alexander, there's a little kind of side chapter in Alexander work, is what we call conscious constructive rest. And conscious meaning we're not sleeping, constructive while meaning we're exploring different aspects of our sense of ourselves in body and mind while we're lying down. And then we can bring that exploration into moving around and being more in our upright lives. So I wanted to kind of weave all those things in today. I'd like to start with just a bit of movement. Chris, you're fine as you are. If you like, you can kind of do what I will suggest from where you are, Chris. I just want to have us, I'm going to give you like maybe 3 minutes to explore just movement that can happen. It can be a shoulder roll, or it can be an outstretched arm or an outstretched leg. If you find that you have an impulse to stand up and move a little bit that way, just have like let's just say, I'll watch the time, a 4-minute authentic movement time where you just explore your own movements as they come to you. And take another half a minute to wind up your moving. And you can come to sitting on your mat in such a way that you can roll back on it when I say that. And as you come to sitting, just sense what that movement brought you. Sense maybe there's a little bit of a little breaking up of some kind of crust of holding or trying or stressing. Just a little bit of that unknown movement for no reason, just simply pure movement. And now think of, sense your breath as you're sitting there. And see how big your breath can be, not necessarily like really pulling in and pushing in the air or pushing it out, but just as you're watching your breath come, if there can be an encouragement for a little bit more inhale and a little bit more exhale, so that you can sense that movement is still with us, even when we're sitting, even when we're not moving in a great big way. We still have the obvious movement of breath. And that can remind us of the breath bringing more oxygen into the blood, which is also moving, and the lymph, which is also moving, and all the electrical systems that continue, brain, thoughts, all these electrical goings on while we're quote unquote not moving. We are moving. So just enjoy that. And then we're going to sense our sit bones on the cushion or on the pad. And see if you can sense your spine. You can't feel it, but you know it's there. And the front of your spine going all the way up to your top joint, which is through what we call the neck and on up to the ear level. That's where your spine ends and your skull sits on top of your spine. So we're just going to think about that length and the depth from our sit bones to our top joint. And then I want you to bring your hands up to the back of your skull and just sense the roundness there. And then you can put your hands in a couple other places on your skull. Just sensing the shape of your skull on top of your spine. As we roll back onto the pad, just think of that long spine lengthening, and you can roll down. You can catch yourself with your palms and let yourself roll down onto the mat, finding your headrest. You can also put something under your knees if your legs are outstretched, or you can have your feet on the ground with your knees directing toward the ceiling in semi-supine. Lots of ground here. Much more ground than when we're standing. More ground than when we're sitting. So rest on the ground. Still noticing your breath. and its movement. And noticing your shape on the ground. Noticing different pressures that you have, things that are rounding themselves toward the ground, like your heels or the back of your skull that you just touched, or the back part in your middle ribs that is curving, the thoracic curve that's curving toward the ground. Just notice the pressure on those shapes. Those are the bony kind of thoughts. If we think of muscles, we can sense our calves and our glutes, the roundness of the buttocks, the wideness of your back, and the backs of your arms. What's touching there? Part of your shoulder blade. Notice the space that you could have between your shoulder blades. And then on up again, you meet with the skin that's on your skull, on the pad. And take maybe 3 more breaths without me talking. And on each exhale, really give it its full length. And see if you can't have that be a message to whatever is still holding on to being up and being off the ground. Your exhale can be a message to just let go, be on the ground, accept the ground. And now we're going to see if we can't widen a little bit more between the shoulders by letting your right hand and forearm come off the ground, having your fingers sort of lead to face the ceiling. And then they can lead the arm up toward the ceiling, the whole arm straightening out toward the ceiling. Your palm can be facing the middle for this. And then we're going to simply let our palm cross over our midlines to the left, crossing over your chest. And when you feel the end of the range of your arm, you let your torso roll with that just a little bit, all the way to your hips. So you're bringing your torso into a kind of spiral. And then when you come back, you're going to lengthen between your armpit and your hips and roll back into width. And then letting your elbow drape back down, and then your forearm coming back down onto the floor. Great. We're going to do that on the other side. Our fingers leading our forearm, and then up toward the ceiling. Crossing over the midline and letting your torso spiral with that, all the way down to your hip. And then when you come back, you're going to roll back into length and width as your arm comes back down to the floor, draping and resting. Sense how, if there's a difference, just sense the width that you've gained from letting that spiral come into your torso on both sides, and then encouraging it to roll back into length and width. And now we're going to sense let's bring our left knee up so your foot is on the floor. Your right leg is outstretched. And I want you to sense just with the thought of raising your right knee to slide your heel toward your sit bone. Just the thought there. And what will it take to actually do that action? So you can think of a little bit of support with the left foot. A second before you actually bring your knee up and slide your heel on the pad. So just that split second of support from the opposite side and then sliding up. And then sliding it back down the right leg. And notice whether or not something else tries to help. Your thoracic spine and the back of your head, the back of your neck are resting. There's nothing really for them to do in sliding your right leg up and your heel toward your sit bones. But try it again and see if you can catch anything else that's trying to help with that. If you sense that, then here's a chance to pause. You simply sense it. Oh, there's my neck trying to help. And then you pause, let your neck go, and then continue your heel journey. Or it might be something in your lower back that starts to try to arch, or in your ribs that starts to try to help. So just experiment one or two more times, outstretching and bringing back your right heel to your right sit bone, just up and down another couple times, using the support of the other side, but not effort. Support, but not effort, or the appropriate amount of support. And then we will end with leaving your right knee up. And we'll begin by, on the other side, by sensing a little pressing, just a slight pressing of your right foot into the ground, which sort of takes the ground a little bit off of the left foot, and then you can slide your heel out. Noticing again if anything else tries to help. And just do your own experiment with that. You can also experiment with matching your breath, and it doesn't have to be in any particular inhale on this or exhale on that, but just see what happens if you allow your breath to also inform this movement. My impulse today is to be exhaling as my knee is coming up and my heel is sliding toward the sit bone. And inhaling when it rests back down. But it could be a different impulse for you. And then we'll end with both knees up in semi-supine. And then I want to do a few little things. These are micro movements of the pelvis. So they're not big movements. The first one is I call it the tail swish or the sit bone reach. You're going to think of yourself as having a long tiger's tail coming out from your own tailbone and reaching out across the room to sweep back and forth on the floor level, but sort of back and forth on a horizontal plane. Your tail's going to swing one direction and then the other. And see what's happening with your pelvis for that to happen. It's just a little bit of a tail wag, not a big one. And see how that affects your knees and your hips. And I'll just talk through this a little bit more. If we're reaching our right sit bone out and swinging our tail to the left, then the left hip sort of comes up toward our ribs, and the right knee extends out from the pelvis toward the ceiling or toward the diagonal up. And then when the tail swings back the other way, the right hip ascends toward the ribs and the left knee reaches diagonally up. So you can initiate this movement with your tail, or you could initiate it with your pelvis and simply sit bone reach with your pelvis in a kind of wag. And your tail, the end of your tail will come along. Okay, good. And now I want to just let our both knees go toward the left as much as they can. There may be some constrictions there, but let your left hip spiral up off the pad and follow your knees over into a kind of spiral. You can let your shoulder come off the ground, or you can let it stay grounded. Either one, it's different experimentations. And then coming back, we're going to start swinging our hip toward the ground to bring our knees back. And we'll go to the other direction, letting the knees go to the right and our left hip bone or our left sacrum come up, and then spiral as much as you can, with or without your shoulder coming off the ground. Maybe a nice breath there. And then leading with our sacrum and hip rolling toward the ground, our left on the left side, that swings the knees back up to sit neutral. We'll do that one more time on each side, letting the knees go toward the left, the sacrum and hip follow, coming off the ground, Shoulder can come off or stretch into staying on the ground. And then coming back, letting our sacrum and hip lead toward the ground, and our legs just kind of wag back to neutral. And then the knees initiate going toward the right, and the left sacrum and hip come off the ground. And then rolling back across the sacrum, letting the left hip and sacrum come down and the knees come up. Great. And if your eyes are closed, then let's open them and just notice what you see from this place on the ground. Notice if adding your sight adds a stimulation that makes your neck want to be involved, or your back starting to think, oh, maybe we're going to do something now. And if you feel that, just let it go, pause, let that go, and simply see with your eyes and with the range of motion that you have in your eyes to look around. Again, the farther you go toward the edge of your eye range, the more you need to be careful of your neck trying to get involved. So just your eyes are looking around. And then if you, as you're looking around, and it might be a little artificial in this case, but if something that your eye falls upon is a touch more interesting than something else, then let your head follow to really look at that. It might be just a color or a shape or the size of something. And then roll your head back, and with your eyes, you can look in another direction and see if there's something else that might catch your attention. And then let your head follow toward looking at that. And the next thing that you land your eyes on, I want you to think about the idea of going in some way and touching that. Now, that's a big jump from where we are, but just a thought. And if you have that thought about actually touching that thing, does something else in your torso go, oh, okay, we're getting? No, that's not what the guidance was just yet. It's simply noticing. So you're leaving the rest of you alone. You're just noticing. And now we are going to move in such a way that you are sitting and looking at that place. So that's a big jump. See what happens when you maybe roll to your side and push up. Come to sitting. And still regarding the object that you have in your view. So now we have a little less ground, but we do have ground from which we can be pretty easy as we come up. And now we're going to come from sitting to standing. And I'm going to let you experiment with that. Do do that in whatever way you want. But at any point that you notice something is holding or pushing you, pause, let that go, and then continue until you're actually standing and looking at your chosen object. So here we are, standing, sense your feet on the ground. Sense the space between you and what you're looking at. Sense your breathing. And then maybe even add in the sense of the space in the room where you and the object are coexisting in a bigger space of the room. If you have a window and you can see out, you could include that space as you are in the room with your object and your feet on the ground. There's many levels of movement and pause. And then we'll shift from one foot to the other so that you can sense one leg filled and the other empty. Whichever leg is empty, that's a pause. And then shift onto it and empty the other leg. So the other leg has a kind of pause. Work always gets distributed moment by moment. Let's shift back to the other foot. And on the next shift, we'll shift diagonally forward so that we're shifting onto our other foot, filling it, but the other leg is behind the filling leg. So that's the empty leg now, but maybe you're still on both legs. And then lift your heel of the empty leg to let your knee fall forward. So you're just on your toes. And then you'll then flop a half step, flop your empty leg forward. And then we'll shift onto it. And then peeling the other heel off. Letting you pause just on the empty leg toes for a moment. And then flop that leg, that foot forward. And take maybe two other steps like that, noticing again any other extra help that's unnecessary. And then after your next two steps, then just go into a regular walk and don't go toward your object, but just decide to go one way or another around the room and then end up at your object. Even when your back is toward your object, you can still be in relationship to it. And then when you get to your object, you can, at this moment, reach and touch it. And in touching it, there's more information. There's the tactile sense of what you're touching. There might be a temperature difference between your hand and it. And notice how your body takes that information in. And then we'll let that go. Take another little gander around the room. And then come back to sitting near your camera. And as you sit, sense the added ground that you have. All right. I would say that's the kind of what I wanted to present today, and I wanted to see if anyone has a comment. If I had a little bit longer time, I would want to experiment, and you can do this later, with speed, because a lot of times we do get to going really fast on things. And I think there's a kind of prejudice or a belief that when we're going fast, we have to be really tight to do that. And that's not necessarily the case. I do think that too many things at one time is a kind of stress. So there's, the option for not trying to do as many things at one time. But sometimes we don't have a choice with that. And when we don't, then it's really great to remember that we have a choice to either pause momentarily when we're going fast, and also notice that it's possible to move fast with ease. I mean, I think of a gazelle, or a lion. They can go from almost non-moving to 50 miles an hour in, like 5 seconds. So there's something to be said for that. But anyway, that's what I have today. Anybody have any comments?
It's really kind of amazing, all those options and all those things that are happening in just the tiniest movement that I'm just unaware of.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like getting acquainted with riches to realize that that those things are happening, and and what the experience of being aware of them can bring, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you, even those 4 minutes that I gave to you just on your own, those can be yours anytime,
I know, but I never do that.
Well, now you can. Because yeah. And obviously I gave you 4 minutes. It's not like you have to go to the gym for 2 hours. But just the fact, just set a little timer and do a little authentic movement like that. It's great.
Thank you. It's a real gift.
Yeah. Oh, I like the crawling. That's great. Crawling is great.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that, since you started doing this conscious constructive rest, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
We started doing it at Southern Dharma a few years ago, before quarantine, I think. It really, I think about it during the day, and sometimes I think, okay, well, I'll just lie down for a minute, and do this. And it's always surprising to me how much my body needs it, even when I think it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So that those 4 minutes, I think that's a good. That was very helpful to think about how much you can release in 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I also wanted to mention there's only a few people here, but that Meredith and I will be leading a retreat at Southern Dharma in November. Do you know those dates? Do you remember those dates? Oh, no, wait, it's
I think
September,
it's
isn't it?
September.
It's September, right. Yeah, it might be on the website. I have them on my calendar, but that's on my computer, so. So some of you might want to see if you can plan that into your schedule. It's what, the second or third week, and it's
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I think it's like the 23rd or
it goes from a Thursday to a Sunday, I think.
yeah, it's kind of short, but
Well, it gives us Friday and Saturday. Well, yeah, it only gives us Friday and Saturday. But anyway,
I don't know where it is. It might be earlier than I think. Yeah. It's the 12th to the 15th.
okay, so it's towards the beginning.
And I could say this out loud too. I was talking with Anne, and it would be really nice to figure out how we can get Anne up without her having to drive.
Yeah.
If
Well,
there's anyone else.
maybe I can do it.
Well, anyway, we'll think about that.
Well, there's always the airplane.
I tried to see about flying from Athens to Charlotte, and I couldn't quite figure that out. So,
No.
yeah, I mean,
Well, we'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
okay. I would love to come. Yeah. I wanted to say something else about the 4 minutes that we just moved, however we felt inspired to move. It just made me think of being a kid. Like that's what kids do. And
Yeah.
that's what we condition ourselves not to do, be spontaneous that way. Yeah, I think that's got some magic in it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's really impressed me how every single time that Stella gets out of her bed, she does a downward dog. And I look at her and I think, yeah, when I stand up, I should be, thinking about my body rather than what I'm going to do next.
Mhm. Yeah.
Or cats, when they start to walk out and then the back leg goes up and then they come back down. Inspiration everywhere.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed is that you said, look where you're holding, and I noticed several times that when I was focusing on what I was doing, I was holding my breath. And at one point you even mentioned that, about your breath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we often have kind of like a set way of doing something, and things just kind of come along when they really don't have to, or they're trying to do something and they really don't, they're not required at that for that particular action, you know.
You said in your last talk that you gave about when we sit upright in zazen, that we sit upright but not held, and
Right.
that has been very helpful. Or even just sitting at the dinner table, you don't have to hold yourself. You just sit at the dinner table and then you
Mhm.
raise your hand to get something to eat. And that being upright but not held,
Mm-hmm.
that's been a real helpful thought.
Oh, great. Yeah. Yep.
Well, I think we're at 11 o'clock. Should we?
We are, yes. All right. Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Need to
Thank
give
you.
back to the mayor.
And we'll give back the merit. May the merit of this practice
May the
May
mayor.
the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit
all
all beings
and bring peace.
And
and bring peace.
Thank you.
thanks so much, Meredith.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.